One of the practices that I've added to my teaching in the last couple of years is social networking. According to the New Media Consortium's 2007 Horizon Report, social networking may represent a key way to increase student access to and participation in course activities. And I would argue that it's also gives them access and participation into the educational process in general, not just in a course activity. It's more than just friends lists. Truly engaging social networking offers an opportunity to contribute, share, communicate, and collaborate. Based on my participation in social networking in the classroom in the past couple years, I would add to the Horizon Report's finding, I would say that it's a way for students and teachers to contribute, share, communicate, and collaborate because educational social networking lends itself to inquiry, which is at the center of all learning. Social networking is not only interesting for what it's done for the students in my classroom, but also for what it's done for my teaching. So how did I get involved in the social networking to begin with? Paul Allison is a teacher in the New York City School District, and he is also a technology liaison for the New York City Writing Project. I teach in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I am a technology liaison for the Utah Writing Project. We met through the Technology Liaisons Network of the National Writing Project. Paul and I and our students have collaborated now in the same online space for a few years. These collaborative efforts have been called Youth Voices. In the 2005-2006 school year, it was on a Manila blog in the National Writing Project blog space. And then this last year, the 2006-2007 year, we were hosted on an ELG, a social networking site. The advantages of working in an ELG, which is an open source system, is that it lets teachers and students set up a blog, a web profile, an RSS reader, and a file repository with podcasting capabilities. Other features that I've found useful and interesting are the friends and community functions. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about those things right now. One of the things that I think is noteworthy about this particular software application is the many different ways students and teachers can connect with one another. As you can see, there are currently 1,018 active users, so that's a pretty big community. And if you were to look at the map that's on the page of the student special places, you'd see that covers quite a bit of the globe. The first thing you'd come to if you were a linear reader and you read from the top left of this page would be the blog. And so you've got a little introduction. This is Youth Voices, a school-based social networking site, a place where high school students share personal blogs. Why not check what people are saying right now? So the first link you'd be brought into would be the blog section, and this is the community blog. Now, I am not going to log into the blog right now because there are some posts that are listed just for logged in users and some that are more restricted posts than that, and so that would kind of be a bad idea if I were to publish something that had something somebody didn't want published to a general internet audience. So even though I'm prompted to use my autosave here and log on, I'm just in the general view right now that all guests would see as you look at the site. First blog post you see is student from Eastside Community High School, Paul's School in New York City. You'll see he's got an audio file here, so he's got some podcast capability. He's writing about a fabulous CD. And he's got some snippets from Wikipedia, so you can see that students have a combination of media in their posts. There's a poem from another one of Paul's students. And then if you go down, there's some students from Eleanor Roosevelt High School, also in New York City. And if you were to go down a little ways, because we got out earlier, our posts have been bumped more to the bottom of the page, you would see students from my class, and one in particular, Laura, who did a recording of an essay she wrote reflecting on her dad's death and what she believes about death. This post was prompted by the NPR series This I Believe. And so the students in my class wrote a This I Believe essay and then recorded it and made it into a podcast that appeared on this blog. And you'll notice there is a comment from a student who's at Paul's school at Eastside Community High School who comments about the significance of that post. Now, one thing I'd like to point out before I move away from this blog post is the comment itself. There is a comment from Nadine at Eastside Community High School. One of the things I should point out first is that sometimes people, when they criticize blogging, that it can't be educational, they'll often point out, oh, there's so many typos in these students' blog posts. And I would say that in my own teaching, and I have to just use that as my frame of reference, you could probably point out a few typos in this comment that this student writer makes on one of my student writers. But I think if I pulled out a random page of commentary that a student wrote about another writer, that there would probably be typos on that as well. And so I would urge you, if you're that kind of thinker, to maybe move beyond just zeroing in on the surface errors here. Because really, I think what's noteworthy about this particular comment, and really it's typical of the comments that students make on Youth Voices, is that she makes a specific reference to the text. She starts, I really enjoyed your blog and I think that it is really good. One thing that stood out to me was when you said, when my dad died, everyone said he was gone, and it truly felt like he was. Now that's a direct quote, not from the student's essay, remember, what she would have read online, but it's actually a direct quote from the student's podcast. So she's talking about the text that she heard and not what she actually read. And again, she quotes, another thing that stood out to me was when you said, I couldn't believe it when she said, he's left me by myself. That is really shocking because it isn't like he wanted to leave. It was his time. Anyways, I really enjoyed your blog and I hope the best for you. P.S. Keep recording. It's interesting. Sure, there's this element of good job, which I run into a lot on student comments, as they don't really get specific enough. But here is a great example of someone who talks specifically about the text, in this case an audio, a podcast, and gives the writer some, I think, specific guidance. I think it's worth noting that the educational social networking that we're doing here is for students and teachers. It's for all learners. And so when you think about that comment that writer just made to the other writer, well, that came from somewhere. In class, we talk about what makes a good blog post, what makes a good comment, those kinds of things. And there's actually a support that is on a wiki, and it is for the teachers, by the teachers, kind of thing. And one of the pages you would see would be sentence starters. So not all students need this, but for those students writing in English in Youth Voices, and they weren't too sure how to respond to a podcast, there are some specific guidelines there. Now, not all students need this. Some students can feel free to comment in their own way, and it's constructive and helpful. But some students need a little more structure, and that's what this resource is all about. So the teachers who are involved in this Youth Voices ELG have a wiki space that we can all edit to add our own resources for each other. So it's akin to like we're all teaching in the same hallway, and Paul teaches right next door to me, and I might say, oh, do you have any handouts on how to make a good comment on a blog post? Only Paul's in New York and I'm in Utah. But that same underlying social structure, I think, is there. I think a good way to see what people have been doing in this social networking site is to actually look at a student example. At the end of my first semester class, a student started writing a bunch of unprompted poetry. I didn't assign these things. He just felt like writing poetry and posted them. And so you'll see that there were a lot of comments he got about his poetry. Most of the comments came from students in my own classroom. So these would be people sitting in the same room as him, and so knew him face to face. But one of the comments came from a student from Paul's school, and she again talks about, here's the part I like. She gives a quote from that poem and says, this is a really strong poem, keep writing. So what happens then is kind of an interesting thing. If you were to look at his blog and his friends, you'll see that that same student is listed as one of his friends. So then if we were go to this person's blog who's in New York and read her stuff, lo and behold, what happens is, who do you think one of the people commenting is? My student, back to her. So there was a nice little interchange of these people had never met. He started writing some poetry. She commented on his poetry, and then he felt that he knew that writer enough to start writing back to that writer in New York City. And then later, here's what he says in his self-evaluation at the end of the semester. He says, a few days ago I wrote a poem about some inner conflict and how it sometimes seems like I'm stuck behind something that I can see past but can't be in. This feeling can be applied to other areas of life, but it's specifically applicable to me in relationships. I was surprised at how many people commented on this, especially a girl from another school who also commented on another piece I did. That astounded me that she would have thought my work worth looking at twice. Let's look at some other ways people might find each other, might be able to connect to each other on this site. After you look at blogs, you could check out tags, and if you were to take a look at this tag cloud, which is different every time you load the page, you'll see the kinds of things that our students are interested in and have tagged the most. And so it's a pretty interesting list of subjects that the students find important. You know, that there's serious writing going on here. 10 people have written about George Bush, 13 people have written about cookies, so maybe that's a little bit more important, but you know, I can relate to that. The N-word, 9 students have addressed that as an issue. Shooting, 7 people have written that or have commented about that. Liars, 18 people have written about that. Virginia Tech shootings, 6 people wrote or commented about that. So it's a pretty interesting view of the kinds of things our students write about. And if I were to refresh this page, it's just another random grouping of the kinds of things that our students are writing about. Money, 102 people have commented about that thing we call money. And war, 52 people have talked about war. So obviously it's a pretty significant topic. And I think these tags then are the way that you might go about seeing what the kids are interested in, but realize they are tags, and so that does take me to a page that will list all of the people who have who are interested, you know, in war. That doesn't say how they feel about war, but they find that. All the people who dislike war, and then people who have actually written things in the category or have tagged their entries as having to do with war. So you can see that's quite a lot of students that if I had strong feelings or if I had questions about war, I could go to all these different people as people to communicate with, or maybe point me to resources about this subject of war. A couple of features that I'd also point out is after you look at some blogs and after you check the tags, um, different students will randomly be presented on the front page here. So sometimes it'll be my students, and sometimes these are all actually from, well, the first two are from Eleanor Roosevelt High School, and here's a student from Paul's School at Eastside Community. I could click on the current communities. So the how am I doing is the thing that the teachers set up, and it's kind of reflections on their blogging. So we use that as a self-assessment tool. So there's, students can set up communities around interests. And then there is this guidelines for joining that we have posted here. And so if teachers want to join this community, like all communities, there are certain expectations and behaviors that are expected if you want to be a member of this community. So that links you to the Wiki Spaces ELG plan, which talks about here's how you join. Feel free to join this community.